All right, I think that's my section here. Before I get started, my name is Jared Eves. I'm the Director of Planning and Programs. One thing when I was kind of learning this stuff, it might help to think of it in four sections. And there are more than four, but the main four sections for me are what we just covered: the problem identification, the program assessment, the objectives, and then the budget. The problem is the issues you're currently having. The program assessment is what you're doing to fix the issue that you're having. The objectives are how we track the progress of what you're doing, of your grant, and then the budget is basically what you would need in order to carry out your project. So these kind of come together as a project, and you'll hear us talk about your project. That is your grant. So that's kind of our word for your what you're putting into EGOS and your problem and program assessment. So you've identified your problem based on what Ms. Shanae had just gone over. Now you need to tell us what you're currently doing to fix the issue, and that is the program assessment. That's where you explain if there are explain what you're doing right now. Explain maybe other groups that are helping you, other departments that are assisting you in within your area to address your issues. You can describe what they're doing and how it helps, or in some cases, how it doesn't help. Maybe it's a hindrance and that's contributing to your problem and hurting your ability to address it. So that's where you would address that. You can mention what you have in terms of equipment to address your issues, and if that is effective in addressing your issue, or if it's lacking and you need something different. This is just kind of your place to identify uh, how you're trying to affect change on your problem in your area. If you can go to the next slide, 24, please, sir. Now mine is blinking out, but I think I see 24 on there, but I don't see the slide. That's okay. Um, you may need some data depending on the type of grant you're applying for. If you are a university, for example, and I think, let's see, I'm lost on the slide there. I have it marked to go to 25, please, sir. If you are a college, you will see, if depending on the type of grant you apply for, you'll see for universities, educational grants, you'll see the college population. That's where you look at the enrollment of your college, how many, I use the word kids, loose the young adults, how many people you have enrolled. For law enforcement agencies, which is on the next slide, you'll see a chart where you have 3 years of previous data. And that is where you'll fill in kind of, oh, there we go, we're back. Good. Just on my side, you'll fill in basically the last 3 years of data so that we can kind of get an understanding of what's going on in your area. I believe, let's see. Okay, yeah, that will cover your chart. If it doesn't apply to you and if it's not applicable, then just place a zero in there. I tend, with my background, I tend to go kind of like we do on police reports. If those of you that know that, instead of leaving something blank, if it's not applicable or if it's there's not a number assigned to it, go ahead and put a zero or NA rather than just leave something blank. It just makes sure that you've covered that box. For goals and objectives, our next section, the let's see. I mentioned objectives earlier as a milestone as part of the four main categories I break it down into. This is just our way of tracking how you're doing on your project, tracking the progress that you've made, or in some cases, the lack of. COVID had us to where we were actually looking at the lack of activity because of what was going on in our world at that time. So we just have to we have to keep a check on what you're doing and the progress that you've made. So in the objectives, you'll have two sections. The goal section is where we have a preset list of goals. So you'll select from that drop down a goal that fits into your project area. And you're only allowed one goal per objective. So you have to select the goal and then you will fill in an objective in the text box. And objectives are usually relatively short, but they are very to the point and effective. So on 29 here, perfect. You're right in there. The objectives should be SMART. That's a term that we keep saying, we keep going over. We use that quite a bit. And SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time sensitive. So a specific objective would be uh, a non-specific would be lowering a DUI rate. Well, that's great, but a specific objective would be lowering a DUI rate by 5% within the grant time. So you're specific about what you're going to do. You're going to lower DUI rate and how much. So it's a very specific objective. The measurable part, the best example that I can think of is a seatbelt survey. If you do a seatbelt survey at the beginning and then a seatbelt survey at the end, then you have a measurable outcome. You can see at this point we started with 85% usage, and at this point at the end of the grant year we ended with 90%. So we have increased our seatbelt usage. So that's measurable, and that allows us to see a change. Achievable. If you set an objective that's not achievable, then your project fails, and we are only successful as our agency as you are. So if you're not successful, then we aren't either. So we want to make sure that you set an achievable goal and not something that you couldn't possibly meet. The relevant portion of it is pretty self-explanatory. It has to relate to the project. You can't have a crazy objective and it not relate to your project. So just make sure it's in line with what you're trying to achieve. And time sensitive, as a general rule, that time frame is going to be within the grant year. You're trying to affect a specific change within a specific time frame, and that is within the grant year, which is October to September. Some examples of just a SMART objective. I was working with the heat units. One of the measurable objectives is that, or the SMART objectives is that seatbelt survey. Um, a heat unit will conduct a minimum of 2 seatbelt surveys during the grant period to include all types of vehicles. One survey will be completed at the beginning and one at the end of the grant period to create a measurable outcome. It's specific because of the 2 seatbelt surveys. It says what they're going to do. It's measurable given those two surveys at the start and the end. It's achievable because they take minimal time and there's only 2 in the year, so you can get that done. It's relevant because one of the main focuses of a heat team is occupant protection, and it's time sensitive within the grant year. So we've created that SMART objective by laying all of those things out in that 2 sentences there. Another would be on the non-law enforcement side. During FY 2020, during the grant year, the grantee will distribute 600 educational material packets consisting of certain types to schools, law enforcement agencies, individuals, and partners within the area. It's specific because it's an educational grant and they're doing educational material. It's measurable because we can see if you're going to do 600 per month, then we can see if you're exceeding or hitting less or right at it. We can effectively say you're reaching that many people, so we can measure what's going out. It's achievable because that was the number they felt that they could reach. And it's relevant. It's an educational grant. This is educational material. And the very first word, two words are during FY 2020. It's time sensitive. It lays it out within that grant year. So on slide 30, activities are basically the actions that you're going to take from your objectives. So you're going to lay out the goal and objective, and then you're going to go in and establish an activity and evaluation. And the activity, it will be monthly typically. Some are quarterly, and some are other time frames, like that seatbelt survey that's twice a year. But usually they are monthly. It kind of measures your activity each month and gives us a way to kind of evaluate what's happening with your grant. On 32 there, The objectives and the activities go hand in hand. So each objective you enter, just like each goal has an objective, each objective has an activity, and the activity helps make it that SMART objective. It kind of further explains what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and the biggest thing to remember is just keep it simple. There's no, you know, this essay must be 1,000 words. There's no word requirement. As long as you've addressed it and it meets that criteria of being smart, of having those components in there, uh, we'll be happy with it, and it'll work. It'll work to lay out what you're going to do. Slide. Let's see. I think that was on 32. I'm sorry, I got a little ahead there on 32. That's keep it simple. Just make sure that we understand what you're going to do, and it doesn't have to be some big essay. So on 33, this screen will give you kind of a layout that you'll see in EGOS, and I see some of you that have been doing this for quite a while, so you're familiar with the screen. If you're not, the little drop down doesn't have anything in it, but that's going to be your goal, and your objective will display right above the activity box. The activity box is where you kind of further explain your SMART action that you'll take. The objective SMART, the activity is SMART, and the evaluation box below that lays out how you'll determine if the activity was successful. So in our seatbelt survey example, an evaluation for a seatbelt survey objective and activity would be that we'll compile the data from the two surveys from the beginning and the end, and we'll determine if the seatbelt usage rate has increased or decreased during the grant year. So that still follows that SMART objective. It lays out specifically that you're going to compile data from seatbelt surveys, that you're going to measure it by comparing the two. It just kind of sums everything up and says, this is how we're going to determine if what we have done is successful during this grant year. The small boxes below the October through September boxes below the evaluation box, those are where you're going to lay out how many contacts or how many what you've named in the objective and the activity. So you will put numbers into those boxes. They don't allow text, it's only numbers. If they are blank or don't apply, put a 0. But for example, if a grant says that they'll make 100 contacts per month, whether that's an enforcement grant that would do speeding or a DUI or something like that, or another grant that in our earlier example that 600 per month, you would place the number in there. So if you make 100 contacts per month, you would place a 100 in each box, October, November, December, and that would total on the right side and give you that 1,200, the total number there. For our seatbelt survey example, where you don't have a number in each box, you would place probably either October or November at the start of the grant period. You would place a 1 in October, 0 out November through August, and then a 1 in September. That would total 2. That would give you 1 at the beginning and 1 at the end, and that would give you your objectives with zeros all the way in between.